So, listen, man, this Trey Hendrickson situation, well, and Shamar Stewart, because I think you got to bake in both of those guys into the same pie here. But new news coming out of Cincinnati this weekend was that Cincinnati, the front office down there, Trey Hendrickson, his camp, have resumed communication on his contract. Okay. That's, I guess, good to hear. But I don't know if anything's really changed that much because I think both these sides are dug in with their perspectives on what this should look like. Trey is a guy that we know has been very productive over the last few years in Cincinnati. 3 out of the 4 years in the Natty, the dude's been balling. Last year, he led the league in sacks. But when you look at what's gone on over the last few weeks, the last couple of months, the cards that Trey has played, whether that's speaking publicly about this situation and, you know, throwing his displeasures out there, eating over $100,000 in fines, throwing that statement out to Shefty, talking to members of the media and saying he'd be willing to miss games. This has gotten messy at this point. But when you are the Cincinnati Bengals and you've gone out and done what you've done financially this offseason, now there's this, I think, some conversations out there for some people who are saying, well, why are you stopping now? Why are you stopping now when you have a Super Bowl caliber team? You definitely have a Super Bowl caliber offense. We don't know about the defense and what that will look like this year. They got a lot to prove. But TLC, when you look at where they are now resuming talks, when I hear that, it's good to hear. But I don't know if either side of this negotiations go on the negotiating table, either side of that table is going to say, oh, you know what? The years that I wanted, if I'm Trey, because I think that's what he wants. Yeah, I'm good with not having year 3 or 4 in this contract. I'll roll with 2 years. Or on the Bengals side of things, them upping the money to a astronomical number, getting him to that Myles Garrett number. I just don't think that anything has changed significantly until I hear that. My stance is going to be the same. And my stance is I don't think the Bengals are going to budge. I don't think they're going to budge now. I don't think they're going to budge come training camp. And I don't think they're going to budge come week 1 because this is a franchise that has done this time and time again. I think they're going to continue to do it and play hardball. And I think Trey Hendrickson is going to play out his last year in Cincinnati and go on to hit free agency and maybe get a deal somewhere else outside of the Natty.
Yeah, I think just because you resume communication does not mean that you are on the same page. Those are two entirely different things. So I do not think that we are necessarily that much closer. It's a step in the right direction. And what this comes down to, and you mentioned it, that Trey Hendrickson claims that he's willing to miss games. Is he actually willing to miss games? Yeah. It's easy to talk like that in May and June, man. No. But when those paychecks aren't coming and you know that you're due however many $1 million, Rothman's been saying, you know, $1 million a game. Yeah. So if you're due $1 million a game and you're just sitting around every single Sunday watching the team play, knowing that, hey, you know, I'm not getting as much as I think I'm worth, but $1 million a game is still pretty dang valuable. At what point do you go, all right, I'm starting to get that itch? And so I think that this is a lot of tough talk. It's probably a lot of tough talk on both sides because they're both being stubborn. And, you know, it's, again, easy to be stubborn in May and June where there's really no risk at this point. Trey Hendrickson, multi-millionaire, is going to give up $50,000 of minicamp money? Like, whatever. That's not changing his life. Right. But the Bengals, they're probably thinking like, oh, he missed minicamp. Guess what? We don't need him to be in minicamp. He can just show up on game day and be a pretty dang good player. You know, what's interesting, too, is you mentioned the part where if this does spill over to the regular season, if you're Trey Hendrickson and let's say you miss the first 3 games, and the Bengals have, unfortunately, under Zach Taylor's watch, had, you know, a history of starting slow. But let's say the first 3 games, they go 1-2. And in those 2 losses are some defensive mistakes, quarterbacks for the opposing team driving up and down the field. And if you're Trey Hendrickson, you're sitting back, you're saying, man, I could have made that play. I could have been the difference in one of those games or both of those games. I think the guilt will kick in. Because Trey seems like he's a really good teammate. He seems like he's got the respect of guys in that locker room. We know this dude can play at a high level, but I'm with you. I think when we get to that point, he will show up eventually because he does care about his teammates. It's a very unfortunate situation
because everything was peaches and cream for the most part in the offseason for Cincinnati based off of what they did with Jamar, what they did with T. Higgins, and then we turned the page into minicamp at OTAs, and here we are talking about this, and Trey Hendrickson's not there. Shamar Stewart has left the building. I cannot wait to see what that looks like come training camp in the next few weeks. Maybe they will get that figured out before we get to training camp popping off, but it doesn't seem like in that locker room that guys are frustrated with what's going on when it comes to Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson. Ted Karras, one of the leaders of the team, he came out and said, there's no resentment. He said there isn't any harboring resentment in our locker room. I really hope both camps can figure this out because we have a really good team. We've had a super productive spring. You just don't want this to carry over into the summer. So that's what this is all about now, is this them quieting the noise. Because when you're a good team like Cincinnati is, good to great team like Cincinnati is, you just don't want this BS going on. You just want it to be all about ball. And so I don't think this will take away from the regular season because I think all this will get figured out come week 1 when they go up to the land and take on the Brownies. But TLC, you know how this works, man. You just want this to be about Joe Burrow, Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, those guys just focusing on the job at hand, and that's just getting in there and grinding every single day and hopefully getting to a point to where you can find yourself in a Super Bowl again, because if they do have any type of respectable defense with the offense they will have, this is a team that has to be dealt with and a team that we all know can be one of the last teams standing if they get everything in order.
Yeah, so it's funny that we're talking about this angle of it, too, because I got a couple sound bites here that we didn't even get to last week. So here was Zach Taylor on whether or not this is a distraction.
It gets a lot of attention in the media and not as much attention in the locker room. And so I think it's very easy for us to isolate ourselves in these walls. We spend a lot of time here. You get asked questions about it, but you just learn to continue, keep it moving. So I think our players are doing a great job just focusing on what's important inside the walls, getting our reps done in practice. Certainly gets a lot of headlines and stories and all that, but we don't worry about any of that stuff. And it could be a contract, it can be an injury, it can be any sort of adversity that's going to strike all 32 teams in this league. It's all going to come in different shapes and forms. It's how your team handles adversity the best, and this team's got a history of doing a great job handling adversity the right way.
Okay, so the Zach Taylor side is that's a lot of noise outside, not so much inside. That's for media, that's for fans. They think it's a big deal, but inside we're pretty focused. Joe Burrow was asked, hey, is this Trey holdout a distraction?
Of course. Last year we had 2. This year we have 1, so we do have less. You'd love to have none, but, that's life in the NFL. We're all supporting Trey and would love for him to be back.
So who's being honest?
Joe is.
Yeah, exactly.
And Joe has been honest this entire offseason. I think Joe's done a good job of playing the game publicly and applying pressure and realizing, oh, yeah, I'm the guy around here. I'm the face that runs the place, and I want to make sure that my teammates know that I have their back. And I think that can go a long way when you're the leader of the team, because I think it could be easy for guys that have the power that Joey B has to do some of this stuff behind the scenes, right? And just go to Mike Brown and go to Zach Taylor in their office and say, what are we doing? But when you take it to the streets and you put it out there publicly, that takes it up to a whole nother level. So I'm sure Trey, Shamar Stewart, all of these guys have to love what the face of the franchise is doing, because they know that number 9 is a true leader, a true friend, and he has my back, especially when it comes to this type of stuff. So Zach Taylor can say what he wants to say. It is a distraction. Will it have any impact on the team? I don't think so. It sounds like guys in-house respect what's going on. And usually more times than not, that's what you hear in sports. When guys know that their teammates are going to bat for themselves at that time when it comes to a contract, you rarely hear a player in-house say, you know what? I don't know what this guy's thinking. He's doing too much. Like, it's rare that you ever hear that. And so this will be fascinating to see. But again, the latest coming out of the weekend is that Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals have resumed communication when it comes to a contract. Coming up.